Hi, I'm Whitney. My pronouns are she, her. Welcome to Inclusive Conversations, our Black History Month series. Today, I'll be chatting with Ryan and Ashley Gage. Ryan and Ashley, we're super excited to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we're excited to be here.
I just want to start by getting to know you. So tell us what you're about. Are you from the Treasure Valley? Are you from Idaho? What's your story? What do you do?
So we are both ministers. I serve as the Minister of Worship and Creative Arts.
I serve as the Connections Pastor, which is connecting people within our church in groups and connecting our church to the community.
Yeah. That's both at Nampa College Church over in Nampa next door to Northwest Nazarene University. We actually are both from Oklahoma. We were both born and raised there. And so we ended up here. Our senior pastor, he was actually our professor in college. And so we also were on staff with him in Texas. And so that's what brought us here to Idaho.
We have 4 kids. Our oldest son is a freshman in high school this year. Our only daughter is a 5th grader. And then we had a surprise and had twin boys who are 8. And that was the finale in our house.
4 no more.
Yeah.
4 no more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Awesome. So I'm going to jump right into a more serious question. One of the really cool things you guys do is Real Black Fridays. Some folks might not know about that. So I'd love to hear what inspired you to start that? What are some of the conversations that you've had, and how do you see that going in the future? Or what are your plans for that in the future?
It's really interesting. If you know me well, it's Ryan who is usually on social media kind of saying the things that need to be said, usually in graceful ways, but sometimes not, you know. But at the beginning of the year and as the year progressed, I kind of just felt kind of a call on my heart that we were getting a lot of questions from people in our friend circles about how to handle the racial injustice that they were seeing play out in 2020. And for the first time, we felt that there was an open space for our voice to be heard. And so I went to Ryan and I said, how about we use the power of social media to kind of raise our voices, maybe bring awareness to situations, and really kind of, what did you say, create
kind of a gracious space for people to engage in these conversations, because we understood that, you know, there's a lot of information coming out to people and they don't know how to process it. People may feel ashamed. They may feel embarrassed that they didn't know about the things that were happening to Black and brown people in this country. And so part of the questions that we were receiving is what kind of prompted us to create the space. It really is just people can email us questions, they can send us direct messages, and we try to address them on our show every other week. I think we call it a show. We don't really know what we call it, kind of like a web show, if you will. But really seriously, we wanted it to be a safe space, a space where people felt like they could be heard without being judged. But then also, too, the other part of that is that we wanted to promote and elevate Black voices. We wanted to also talk about history, Black history in particular. We also want to elevate the voices of Black and brown people in the community that we're in. And so, you know, hopefully, as we continue to grow, we'll continue to engage in conversations with people here in the Treasure Valley as well.
And I think it's also important, you know, our background has predominantly been in majority culture spaces. We have pretty much always lived in spaces where majority culture was all that we knew. And I'm a child of adoption, transracial adoption. So literally even in my own household, all that I was raised to see and raised to reflect was majority culture. So we had this kind of relationship we felt like we could kind of press into, if you will. A lot of times we felt like our white brothers and sisters were afraid that they were going to be too awkward to ask a question. They were, you know, say the wrong thing. And so
or they even assumed that those kinds of things didn't happen to us because, oh, it's Ryan and Ashley, right? They're not like that, or whatever the case might be. Yeah.
So it's just been a great place to open dialogue and have some good conversations.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. I know that you guys are like, well, maybe it's a show, maybe it's not a show. You have well over 1,000 followers, I believe, on the Facebook page. And I'm just curious, when you're getting questions or when you're deciding to talk about something specific, do you see a trend? Do you see a commonality? Is there something that sort of sticks out? And I know for Inclusive Idaho, when we started, allyship was a really big thing. Folks just wanted to know what to do, what to say, like where can we start? But do you guys see a common thread, or is it sort of all over the place and you're able to really see diversity in what folks are looking for?
I think the biggest thing was people wanted to know, where do they begin? And I felt like we had to kind of press the pause button for them and say, okay, before you can begin, you're going to have to learn, right? You're going to have to listen and hear not just our stories because you're our friends, but hear stories of other Black and brown people in your community. And because obviously we all have different experiences, we all have had different upbringings, but the commonality of our skin, is what has binded us, and that is, a part of the story that we're trying to tell. And so I think we had to kind of help people recognize, before you can do, you have to stop. You have to to listen.
Right. We use, I love Latasha Morrison. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she has an organization called Be the Bridge.
I do.
Yeah, which has wonderful material. But the 4 things that I absolutely love that she has established are the ideas of, listening, learning, lamenting, and then leveraging. And so a lot of our people want to get to that leverage. They want the do, but realizing that there is a journey to get to that. And without those steps, it becomes that performative allyship that we all see, where we're, taking pictures and posting them at the trendy rally or whatever it might have been, putting the once a year quotes on your, on MLK Day. So moving people out of the idea that performative allyship is what it's about, and instead like realizing it's a journey that we're leveraging in our daily lives, every day.
Yeah, that's great. So I think the next thing, when I think about what you guys do, you're doing racial justice work, essentially, at the intersection of ministry in a very white state, and in a state that is pretty culturally full of believers, so people who traditionally describe themselves as religious. Whatever the denomination might be, they describe themselves as religious. And so what are the challenges in that? There must be challenges that must be hard work to press up against, pursuing ministry, doing ministry full time, and also intersecting that with racial justice work in a state where most people, and in a community, maybe even in a church where most people don't look like you.
Right.
That's a very difficult question, and I think part of the difficulty of it is knowing that at times it feels like history is repeating itself, right? Especially when you think about church history. You think about the church's response to the civil rights movement, and we'll say, let's talk about the white church specifically,
right,
and their response to the civil rights movement. And so I know that our denomination has had a lot of conversations about making sure that we get this conversation right, making sure that we somehow don't miss the mark, and somehow continue to marginalize Black and brown people, not just within our denomination, but within the country. We are not perfect people. We are not a perfect church. We are not a perfect denomination. But we hope and we pray that we will be infused by our living God to do this work to help bring about what we call the new creation into the world. And that can look very different. And I think one of the biggest things we have to help people recognize too, that there is a sacrifice, right? There is a sacrifice that the church may be called to give up its seat of power, or the seat of power that we assume that we have as a denomination and as an entity, for the purpose of righting this wrong.
I think the other thing, in what we are doing with Real Black Fridays, as people of faith, the people of faith that we are, that roots how we see the world, and that roots our perspective on racial justice. We believe that we were created in the image of God, and that in our diversity, in the way that He created us, it binds us in unity altogether. And so being able to honor that and share that with each other and help people to understand. I mean, when you study the Bible, or when people are looking at the Bible, the Jesus of the Bible was continually reaching for people on the margin, the oppressed, those without power, those who were left out with a seat at the table. So to be able to continue to share that and help people to realize that diversity is not something that divides us, but in the body of Christ, it's what calls us together. And to me, diversity helps fully kind of bring the scope of what the new creation that Ryan was talking about, that new creation, into the fullness that Christ meant it to be. So yes, we will always have, I think, a hard balance to walk, because it is a personal transformation of heart that has to take place when people are navigating the world of, speaking of things of injustice in regards to race. So although it is personal, we feel like it's also a calling from Christ to walk through.
Right. And I think that the things that we are asking people to do, these are questions that we have asked ourselves as a couple. Yes, it looks completely different because we are, people of color, but, there are sacrifices that we are making to continue to do this work. And so, what we are asking people to do in terms of sacrificing, in terms of leveraging, we recognize that we have done those same things as well. And so we never want to invite people to go into places that we ourselves are not willing to go.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So switching a little bit, you guys are Black, and you're raising a Black family in Idaho. And if there was maybe one thing or specific thing or something that you wanted people to know that live here, or even people who are considering relocating or building their own family here, what would you say that is? What is the one thing about being Black in Idaho, whether it's great or maybe something you see we need to work on, maybe a concern or something that you enjoy? But it's reality. We're living, you and I, we're living in a majority white space, and I think it does bring challenges. So I'd love to hear sort of what is the one thing that you guys ponder on or reflect on, or share with folks who aren't from here.
I was gonna say, I think for me, this is the first space that we have lived in as a family of 6, where we have been able to connect with other people of color in community groups like Brown Like Me for our children, to be able to see other children that might not be in their local schools, but across the Treasure Valley. I think that has really brought a sense of belonging, especially in a time where everything felt so isolated.
Yeah.
You knew that you had people that were walking through some of the same journey that you were. So I will say that Idaho has brought that to an experience that we hadn't experienced before in the previous states that we have lived in. I don't know if it is more location or what we have walked through over the last year or so, but as parents of children of color, it's been heavy. Watching the news is
For
heavy.
sure.
Yeah.
Having conversations with our 15-year-old about it's probably not a great idea to head to the park with your Nerf gun strapped on your back.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to get emotional, so I'll let you talk.
I think in general it has been safe. For us as a family, it's been a great place for us to thrive as a family, and all the things that Ashley has mentioned have been very important. But also too, even in those moments where there have been uncomfortableness, we have felt heard, right? We have not felt diminished. We haven't felt like we have been accused of being angry Black people. That really this community has embraced us and are willing to come alongside us and figure out, how do we go about doing this work together? How do we how do we love on your family? How do we love on other families of color, and do that well? So I think for us, it's been really great. So I know that there were some people, well, I'll be honest, a lot of people of my family, they were like, you're moving to where? Are you sure you want to go there?
Are there black people there?
Are there really black people there? And we asked that question too, because we didn't know much about the state, but the longer that we've been here, we have fallen in love with the beauty of the state too. But then also too, there is a genuine kindness that you can see in people, and so we try to latch onto the goodness of people the best way we can.
Yeah, I love that you talked about that there's a community here, and one of our other conversations that was mentioned as well, because there's sort of an idea that there's not necessarily community here, but if you really start looking and peeling back the layers, you'll see that there is a community of Black folks here, and that they're accessible, and that we do things together, and that there is a support system. And sometimes it's not as visual as other cities. You might not be able to walk around downtown and see it all the time, but there is that aspect. So I love that you said that too. I think the last question I have for today is, what does Black history mean to you guys? We're doing this conversation as part of our Black History Month series, and I would love to hear, when someone says Black history or you think about Black history, what does that mean to you?
You can go first. I'll let you go first.
Let you go first. Yeah, I think for us, Black history is an opportunity to lean in and help kind of establish a legacy, if you will, for our children. We talk about not only Black achievement, but what has brought us to this point, the good times and the very hurtful times. But for me, Black history is that kind of all of that woven in together. Yes, we want to focus on it in February, but I feel like one of our goals would be to see that these moments of Black history, these moments of celebrating Black excellence would show the world that when you have like an Amanda Gorman step up on Inauguration Day, there are many more Black creatives, Black CEOs, Black bankers, whatever it might be, living into this legacy of Black excellence, and it's not an exception. Black excellence is not an exception, but something that should be a standard. And so, taking the time in the month of February and throughout the year to note that is, I think, an important part of Black history to me. Yeah.
That's why I let her go first. I will say, and I think I tweeted it the other day, that representation affirms the reality of dreams. And I think that is what Black history is to me, right? It's that representation of Black skin. It's the representation of Black excellence that Ashley said. But then also, too, it gives you a sense of belonging, right? So when I think about my kids, or when I think about young other students that I've taught in the past, it gives them a belonging, a place where they can see places that you can aspire to, and that's exciting. And again, kind of like what Ashley was saying, part of our mission too is to not let it just be, condensed into 28 days out of a calendar year, but that we continue to keep that in the forefront. We keep elevating these voices and let the world see this Black excellence that we all know about, the things that we have heard stories about.
Yeah.
So it's about belonging, it's about community. I also think it's about safety too as well.
Cool. So actually, that's not my last question. Real Black Fridays, we've talked about that a couple of times. I know you guys have a Facebook page. What is the future of that? Is that something you're going to continue to do? Are you anywhere else besides Facebook? And do you want anyone to know, do you guys want anybody watching to know something about that they may not already know, or how to tune in, or what times you guys show up online?
Well, we're getting ready this next week to kind of roll out what we will be doing during the month of February. We are rolling out a podcast as well.
Oh,
so
great.
you guys will be able to tune into that on your different podcast platforms, and continue doing a monthly whatever we called it,
Webisode,
vlog,
yeah,
webisode,
Yeah.
on Facebook. We also are on Instagram with Real Black Fridays as well. So just continuing the conversation, however that looks, however the conversation leads. So yeah.
We keep providing, just daily content usually, since our show comes on every other Friday. So right now, for example, we are talking about the 10 Commandments of Nonviolence from the Civil Rights Movement of the 60s. And we're kind of breaking that down each day and asking the question, how can that be applied to our lives today? How, as we are continuing to move into this movement of equality, how can we learn from our brothers and sisters from the Civil Rights Movement and use that example of nonviolence in the work that we are trying to bring about today?
Okay. And what time do you guys do the show on Friday? On the every other Friday?
It's usually 8:00 Mountain Standard Time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you do have an Instagram. I just want to
We
reiterate
do.
that. I did not
Yes.
know
We
that,
do.
so I'll look
Yeah.
for it for sure. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. It was a really great conversation, and we're super lucky to have you guys with us today.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you for having us. Appreciate it.
To those of you watching, thanks so much for joining us for Inclusive Conversations. Please check out the other conversations in our Black History Month series.